Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Instagram Live conversation. I am proprietor Jason Haas. Happy to have you with me on an April afternoon where we actually have some breaking news. I am incredibly excited to have Harmon Skurnik, president and co-founder of Skurnik Wines, importer and distributor, and also one of the directors of the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance, who will be joining me momentarily. But while we wait for people to sign on, I wanted, as I always do, to share some pictures of what's going on here at the vineyard. So it is high springtime here. So we are in the middle of bud break. We've seen bud break on probably 70% of the vineyard. This is some Grenache up at the top of the hill, but we're seeing it pretty widely. It's not just Grenache. It's not just the tops of the hills. This is our little Muscardin block. We've got a lot of bud break in everything from Viognier to Marsanne to really almost everything except for Roussanne. It is also prime wildflower season. It's super beautiful out here right now, and I think with the rain that we got and the sun that we're having, that's great. In the cellar, we are working on blending. So we made the blending decisions on the whites from 2024 about a month ago. Many of you probably saw the blog that I wrote about it. If not, the details are there. But we are now physically putting those together. So this is Chelsea and Craig in the cellar this morning, tasting through the individual barrels to put the blends together. We are doing the Esprit Blanc and the Roussanne, Côte Tablas Blanc, all of the things, and then a smaller collection of varietal wines, but still a really exciting one. What else do we have? Oh, we are trying to get the cover crop under control. So if you looked at most of the vineyard, this was from a couple of days ago. Some of the cover crop, the grasses, particularly the oats, are taller than I am right now. So one way or another, we've got to get that under control. So we're doing some crimping trials. We're also mowing to allow the flow of air and light to get in and air to flow downhill. And we have tried to get the sheep into the last few low-lying areas. You can see that they trampled down some of the grasses here in this Tanat block. So anyway, we're at the point of we're cleaning things up. It'll look very different in a month. But right now, so far, so good. We have dodged frost so far. We have good long-term weather in the forecast. We got enough rain this winter that we're feeling good about the growing season and are sort of what we could wish for right now in terms of weather and conditions here at the vineyard. Okay, so that's enough. I hope you enjoyed that little lightning tour, but I'm going to invite Harmon to join, and then we have breaking news to share, and can't wait to learn from him all of the stuff that he's working on. So. And hopefully this works all as straightforwardly as it did when we did our test last week. Remarkable. Hey, Harmon.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. It sure looks beautiful around the vineyard there. A lot nicer and more beautiful than it does here in New York. It feels like winter has returned.
I know my wife and our older son are going to look at Vassar, do a second visit to Vassar College, leaving tomorrow. And they were looking at the weather forecast. It's supposed to be like 40 something and raining the whole time that they're there.
Well, she may want to reconsider coming to school in the Northeast.
I mean, you gotta learn it. If you're considering it, you gotta learn what you're in for.
That's right. Well, at least we have 4 seasons here.
Yeah,
And it's springtime, so we're looking forward to some better weather.
yeah. And we've had some
Um,
spring weather. Felt like last week was nice, wasn't it?
yes, it was. Yeah, good to
Yeah.
see you. It has been a while.
Yes, it is. It's nice to see you. So I kind of teased as we started that like we actually have breaking news. I just saw that the Trump administration paused most of the so-called reciprocal tariffs, with the exception of that 10% baseline tariffs and the tariffs on China. Like I guess, like what was your reaction when you saw that? Was it relief, disbelief? Where are you right now?
Um, it's shocking, but I mean, shocking is the norm now. I mean, welcome to the whipsaw world of the Trump administration and economic uncertainty, and it's every day it's something new. Um, Maybe that's exciting for a drama or a movie, but for us in the business world, we like predictability and certainty, and we have none of that right now. So yeah, it was a relief. Of course, there's been multiple threats, as much as
Right,
200% on wine and spirits, and which of course, something like that would be a death knell to our industry.
right.
So when it came out last week, where there were multiple tariff rates for multiple countries, ranging between 10 and 50%.
Yeah,
uh, that was, of course, everything's better than 200%, but it was still worrisome. The EU was 20%, South Africa was 30%, et cetera, et cetera, and it was bad news. So
yeah,
and I think, we see what happens with that bad news, with the reaction to the stock markets,
yeah.
and with 5 days in a row of the markets getting pummeled and the pressure building. It just seems like today he finally blinked a little bit. And
Yeah, and I mean, I know one of the things that we were really worried about is that there was no guarantee that even what was announced last week was where things were going to end up, because of course, like, other countries will surely retaliate against what they see as unfair impositions of taxes, and then of course you just don't know where you go from there. There will be retaliations to the retaliations, and you could end up with something that's a lot worse than even what we saw last week. So
well, you can see that's happening with China,
yeah,
because they have retaliated and they've decided, I guess President Xi is as much of uh, uh, a you know, a strong man as Trump wants to be. And so, neither one of them wants to back down. So,
right,
tit for tat, tit for tat. And now, Trump has responded with 125% on China. So it's just, where does it stop?
right,
But the other countries have shown that they want to negotiate. I mean, Europe has said flat out, if you go to zero, we'll go to zero. I mean, I think that should be the ultimate goal. Should be free trade and 0%.
right,
But unfortunately, I don't know that that's something that the administration, our current administration, wants to achieve, even though that should be the goal,
right,
because they think that they like having these potential trillions of dollars of tax revenue. And make no mistake, tariffs are taxes,
yeah.
taxes on American citizens. Some people have a misconception that, these are paid by foreign countries. That's absolutely false.
No, they're paid
Uh,
by American businesses at the port of entry.
exactly, exactly. And so, they like the fact that these create revenue, up billions and billions of dollars of revenue, so that they can, make permanent their tax cuts for
Right.
billionaires, et cetera. So um, it's disconcerting, and of course, we would be very much in favor of the zero for zero kind of end game, and that would be great if it ended up that way. But we'll see. We just really don't know. We still have uncertainty.
You think of how many twists and turns there have been just over the last few weeks. Like, who knows what the future will bring? But and I have a bunch of questions where I want to dive into the specifics of tariffs, but I also want to get a little bit into your backstory. So, I mean,
Sure.
you and your brother Michael founded Skurnik Wines 36 years ago. So, same 1989, same year as Tablas Creek. And
Well, it's actually 38 years. 87 is when the company was
oh, okay,
founded. I joined him in '89,
oh,
so
okay. So
just
you're a newcomer.
yeah.
Um, so I'm curious, when you did that, like, were you still expecting to be doing this 36 years later?
I didn't even know if I would be able to do it 6 months later. I had another career at the time. I was in marketing. I worked in advertising in New York. And you know, my brother Michael started the company, and after 2 years, he had a few American wine producers that he was distributing by himself. And when he landed the Kermit Lynch portfolio of French producers, he gave me a call and said, you better quit your job and come work for me because we've got something here. And I actually hesitated because I had a 10-year career in marketing, and I had a 2-year-old son at the time.
Right.
And I didn't know whether he'd be able to pay me what I was earning then, and I was earning about $35,000 a year at the time. So it was harrowing, and I thought about it, and of course my father, who we both revere, just as you do. I knew your father. He was a great man. Always used to tell me, what's the worst thing that could happen, with an important decision, and if you could live with that, then you could make that decision. And I realized that the worst thing that could happen would be the company would go out of business and wouldn't work,
Right.
and I'd go back to my marketing career. And when I realized that I could go back and get a job again, I took the leap of faith and did it. And no, we had no business plan, no idea what we would be doing 38 years later. But here we are.
Cool. Can you share a little bit about kind of what the scope is of what Skurnik does? Because you have an import piece, you have distribution piece in several states. Kind of share what the business is and does.
Sure. Well, we started as a distributor only in New York State, and slowly we expanded to additional states. New Jersey being the first because it's right next door, and New York and New Jersey is really one market.
Yep.
And then after that was Connecticut. One state at a time. We now are in 9 states, including your state of California, which we started in 2017. It's going very, very well. We have a full team, Northern and Southern California, full team of sales reps, and we deliver the entire state. And we also in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, which came about when we took over a distributor of ours, actually, who was kind of failing, and we took over the company and have expanded it and grown it tremendously. So we're a wholesaler in 9 states, but we're also an importer of wines from throughout the world that we sell to other distributors in all 50 states, or the other 41, if you
Right.
will.
And so how how were you feeling about things as you entered 2025? So sort of pre-tariffs, how were you feeling about like your business and the wine business in general and the import and distribution side?
Well, tariffs aside, things have kind of been a little bit flat. I mean, we have a saying over the last 6 months or a year that flat is the new up. Um, because not everybody is flat.
Yeah,
There's the wine business has some headwinds at the moment,
for
which
sure.
I'm sure you're very well aware of. Um, there's competition with legalization of cannabis, particularly in our market here in New York, which has just recently done it. You've had it in California for a while, so it's old news. There's also been headwinds with the World Health Organization, stating health issues about alcohol, which runs counter to some of the research.
Yep. Yeah, I had Felicity Carter on as a guest to talk about that a few months ago. It's something that we've dived into, but yeah, for sure.
But this kind of like neo-prohibitionist movement that seems to be getting a lot of press is hurtful to the industry. So so we're cautious, but we continue to grow. We have we're successful. We bring on new relationships, new products, um, and spirits is a relatively new uh, segment for us that's growing very rapidly also. So we're very, very well diversified, both in portfolio also in business across the country. So,
Yeah,
uh,
great. Um, okay, so let's dive back into tariffs.
sure,
So I think one of the things that maybe people don't fully understand is that the way that it's required by law that wine and other alcohol be distributed in the United States means that yes, a tariff will hurt a foreign producer, but it'll hurt American companies more. Can you kind of take people through that math?
sure, sure. Yeah, that's something that it doesn't necessarily apply to other products. If you have just take aluminum or steel or whatever else they tariff. Sometimes that can be an effective measure for combating unfair trade practices. Steel and aluminum made uh, in America is the same as steel and aluminum made in China. So if you equalize that or put tariffs on it,
Right.
it could be an effective strategy. But with the wine business and spirits business, post prohibition, there are laws in place. It's a regulated industry. So there are laws in place that say that wines and spirits that come into this country must be imported by an American owned company, and they must in turn sell to an American owned wholesaler, and they must in turn sell to an American owned retailer. So that's not the case with other goods, like,
Right.
for example, French handbags, if you will, like Louis Vuitton bags. They have a store on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and it's a French owned store. So if you tariff a French product like that, you may be hurting the French company more than an American company because the French company even owns the company here.
Right.
But that doesn't happen with wine. So there's a calculation that was done by the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance that says for every dollar that is purchased of wine from foreign countries, American companies in aggregate make $4.50 for every dollar. So if you tariff that French wine, you end up hurting many, many more American companies than you do the target of the French. That's something I don't think the policy makers really understand when it comes to the alcohol business.
Yeah, and that's something that those sort of quick calculations it highlights the kind of interrelatedness of the distribution networks that sell American wine and imported wine as well. I know one of the things that we were really worried about when there was the potential of 200% tariffs on the table is that it would cause kind of systemic collapse of the distribution network that we also as a domestic winery are required to use.
Well, I got to say, you understood that concept very early on, and I want to just say thank you because I know that in some cases where with the lobbying that we're doing in Washington, you have been asked to participate, and you did so willingly and have been very supportive of our position, and that's exactly right because I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there where people say, well, if we hurt the foreign uh, wine companies or foreign wineries, that's going to be great for American wine producers. But
Right.
as you just said, uh, we're a regulated business and you need to sell to distributors around the country. You can't sell directly to the retailer
Yep.
in those states. That's the law. And so if suddenly there's a 200% tariff and your distributor who sells American wine and foreign wine, we all do, we sell American wine and imported wine. If we suddenly go out of business because we can't pay $1 million or more in tariffs to get that container cleared to bring it into my warehouse, put us all out of business, that's no good for American wineries either.
And there's not the capacity in American wine to make up the difference of imports anyway. I mean, so American wineries make roughly 300 million cases of wine a year. The U.S. domestic market consumes roughly 375 million cases, and of that American production, 40 million cases are exported.
Right.
So like if you would think how much more, like it just like the math doesn't work. It would end up everybody would end up poorer off.
But even if it could, even if there was enough production to make up for it, wine is not fungible. I don't know if your audience knows and the economic term fungibility. What it means is that yes, you make wine. In fact, you guys make incredible wines, very extremely high quality wines that are similar to some of the wines from the Rhone Valley. Famously so. But they're not. It's not Bocastel and
Right.
it's not Cornas. I mean, there's a uniqueness to the terroir of those places. Um, Chablis can only be made in Chablis. Barolo can really only be made in Italy.
Yeah.
And there's Sangiovese in California, but it's not Brunello.
Yep.
Uh, the idea of terroir is so ingrained in all of us in the wine industry. We understand that it speaks of the place it comes from.
Yeah.
Your wines are amazing, but they're not exactly the same as Roussanne grown in the Rhone. So, um, uh, you know, so it doesn't replace it. If you own an Italian restaurant in anywhere in the United States, you have to have Italian wines.
Right.
You can't just replace all your Italian wines with Cabernet and Pinot Noir. It doesn't lend itself to the authenticity of the experience.
Yeah.
Americans know this, and American wineries wouldn't want a, a world where only California wines or only American wines existed in our country. We love having, and some of our California winemakers are our best customers because they love wines
Yes.
from Europe and other places. So why, it's insanity, really.
I mean that's one of the things that I see as one of the potential downstream risks to all of this is that like we have the most dynamic wine market in the world. We have a great domestic, vibrant domestic producers market with wineries now in all 50 states. We also have access to all of the great wines from the rest of the world. And I don't think people realize how unusual that is that we have um, both great domestic wineries and great access to imported wineries. Most countries are not like that. Most countries have one or the other. And most countries have much higher tax rates on things than we do. So, like this incredible flowering of American wine culture that has led to half of the world's master sommeliers being in America, and the growth of wine that's lasted 2 generations, and the spillover into restaurants and wine shops and the sommelier community, like that has been possible because we have this incredible market that has the best domestic and the best imports all available. And I think like it would be the end of a golden era if that were
Yes.
if that were compromised.
Totally. I mean, even the growth of California, the California wine industry, if you take just Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, for example, the growth that's really lifted California wine business. Why were those grapes planted? It's
Right.
because the French benchmarks of those varieties, whether they be from Burgundy or Bordeaux, were just like you said, we had access to all of those for all those years. Those became the benchmarks. That's what we want to plant. We want to compete on the world stage. It wouldn't have happened if Americans weren't exposed to those wines that were so great.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a little bit of history. Like we did have back in 2019, there were 25% tariffs that were placed on not all European wines, but some European
Right.
wines.
Right.
So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what the impacts were that last time when those were in place for, or were they in place for like a little under 2 years,
That's right.
and also talk a little bit about how this time is different. In what ways this is different than what we would have seen 6 years ago.
Well, it's very different. Back then, it was a dispute between Boeing and Airbus, believe it or not, and that's why we ended up with tariffs on wine. If you can figure that one out, just the way the world works doesn't make sense always. But yes, it was limited. It was limited to table wines, and it was only from several countries. It wasn't all of the EU. And it was 25%, and it was it it was a hassle, and it resulted in prices going up somewhat. It was somewhat mitigated by the fact that we, as the importer and the producers, got together and said, well, maybe we can get some discounts on the wine, so that we didn't have to raise it exactly 25%. Sometimes the wines went up 10%, but it did hurt business. I mean, business for those countries did decrease at that time. And it was just a royal pain in the neck. I mean, we like to spend our time in this business tasting great wine and presenting it to our customers and talking about the wonders of the wine growing process and how wonderful the wines taste. And we don't want to talk about unnecessary price increases. That said, now, not only are they talking about uh, tariffs, that could be 20% or it could be 50% or 200%, but the tariffs that went into place that were announced last week affected much more than the wine industry. It affected the entire world of imported goods, and I think that's one of the reasons why the stock market has, uh, you know, taken such a dive so quickly, because it's such a universal attempt at extortion, if you will.
Yeah.
Sorry for such strong words, but that's what it feels like. The mob boss and the extortion, um, to and impacting the entire economic engine. So it's much, much worse this time. I mean, by an exponential factor. And of course, there's also the uncertainty within the wine and spirits world right now. Even though we just got a little bit of a break for 90 days, where it'll be 10% instead of 20 or 30, we still don't have a resolution on this 200% threat,
Right.
even though we do think it will be resolved shortly. We probably know by the 15th of April on that, because there was the reason the 200% threat came was because Europe had threatened 50% tariff on American bourbon and other things like Harley Davidson motorcycles and whatnot. But they did back down on the bourbon threat. So they came out with their list of retaliatory tariffs,
Okay.
which was against the aluminum and steel uh, tariff. It's hard to keep this stuff straight. Uh, but they did remove the bourbon from the list, so we expect that threat of 200% should not come to fruition because of that. But we don't know, and we won't know until a certain person tweets.
Right.
This is what our country's about.
And you might not even know then, because it could change in 48 hours later.
This is where we are.
So I'm curious, like one of the things that seems to me this hidden cost in all of this is the fact that you're having to prepare for so many contingencies. Like I can only imagine like what you've planned for over the last 6 days that you now are having to reevaluate, or at least maybe I shouldn't pose this so negatively, but that you now are have the opportunity to reevaluate and not have to
Right.
do. Um,
Right.
but I'm curious, like, are there things that you can share that you had planned on doing, that the changes that you had to make over the last week that now you have to go back to the drawing board and look at again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for one thing, we had to stop shipping.
Right.
We had to stop most of our shipping, which is very, very disruptive. Because of, if there was even a small chance of a 200% tariff, it could completely
Yeah.
freeze up our cash flow, and so, or put us out of business. I mean, or if you're a smaller company, it would definitely put you out of business. We have been, as you can imagine, getting together our executive team. We call our board of makers, been getting together and figuring out, assuming that it was going to be 20% on the EU, 30% on South Africa. I don't know, it was 17% on Israel, et cetera, et cetera. and going through and figuring out what we're going to do with pricing. We have a lot of wines are in stock now, so they wouldn't be in fact affected at all. We did have a one positive thing that the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance was really pushing hard for, and that we achieved, which was an exemption for goods that were already on the water by the time the tariff went into effect. So that was also that did not happen in 2019. In 2019, the the tariff was announced, and if you had goods on the water and they arrived the next day, you were slapped with that tariff, and that was really unfair and terrible. Uh, so they did at least give us that. Um, but we had come up with a formula for wines that would be tariffed going forward and what the pricing structure would look like. Um, when there's a 25% of 20% tariff, it doesn't mean that the wines go up 20% necessarily. In our case, we had decided that we weren't going to consider that an additional cost like we do with every other cost. With the tariff, we were just going to add it onto the top. So no marking up the tariff. We decided that as a company, and I think other companies that are in the trade alliance would probably do it similarly, but not necessarily. But we figured it would mean an increase of between 8 and 14% on most of the tariffed wines. Then there's, again, talking to suppliers and saying, hey, do you want to contribute and help to mitigate this increase and try to keep the price increases to a minimum as best we can? But it's a lot of work. It's every item, every producer
Right.
would necessarily be different.
And now you get to do this all again with a
And
different
now that
baseline
it's
number.
lower, it's good news for the market, but we still have a 10% tariff to deal with now because every country but China, China is the exception. As you may have heard, they got their tariffs raised instead of lowered because they have decided to go toe to toe with him. So.
Um, so we've mentioned it kind of obliquely a couple of times, but I'd love you to talk a little bit about what the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance is and does.
Sure. It was created in 2019 because when the tariffs hit last time, we were all caught flat-footed. I mean, at that time, I was in business for 34 years or whatever it was, and the word tariff never even entered our lexicon.
Right.
We didn't, you mentioned the golden age. I mean, we didn't know that this was even possible, that it could happen. I mean, this is a country of free trade. This is a country of the free market, right? Of course, we have duties and taxes, and there are excise taxes that we pay in this business, but that's been the same for many, many decades. So when they announced this thing, one of the reasons we never got the goods on the water exemption is because we didn't even know that this is something we should be anticipating or to fight. So when that happened, that's when the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance was born, and that's a group. We have a board of 5 individuals, ranging from myself and Ben Anaf, who's the president, who's a retailer in New York. We have Kate Laughlin, who is president of Martine's Wines in California. We have Jeff Zachariah from Zacky's on the board, um, and Andy Fortgang, who's from the Pigeon in Portland, Oregon. So we have a good team. We got together at that time, and the entire sole purpose of the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance is to fight tariffs. We don't do anything else for the wine advocacy except for that. And for the last 4 years, when Biden was elected, the tariffs were overturned or eliminated, and so for the last 4 years we've been kind of dormant. We haven't done anything. But 6 months before the election, we got together and said, it's possible that the Trump administration could get in again. And even though we're not a political organization at all, we realize that if the Republicans win, the threat of tariffs were much higher because that was his campaign promises
Yep.
the whole time. And of course, it has come to fruition.
And so, um, so in the actual work that the USWTA does, I mean, there's a lot of PR pieces that I see. I mean, I think you've done an incredible job of sharing almost in real time the decisions that have been made and the impacts of those. Is there also kind of an advocacy lobbying side of things?
Yes. Yeah, we have, well, first of all, the membership, I mentioned the board members, but of course that's just 5 people. But we have an incredible membership of over 100 companies who are contributing to allow us to function. It's quite an expensive
Yeah.
proposition. But one thing I've found, Jason, in many years in this business, it's really hard to get wine people to agree on anything. I mean, there's always multiple opinions. What do you like better? Or even in terms of anything to do with business, you get a bunch of wine distributors in a room and they can't agree on anything. When it comes to tariffs, it's universal. We all are anti-tariff. I mean, so it makes the organization much more effective because we are all aligned, and we're very motivated to fight this. So we're able to raise a lot of money. And to answer your question about advocacy and lobbying, we absolutely we have we've hired the best lobbying firm in Washington D.C. Called Aiken Gump. They're fantastic. They're some of the lobbyists that work for them, the lawyers who work for them, have been in previous administrations, including the Trump administration. So they have great contacts, and we will go down there occasionally to meet with senators and congressmen and women, and we'll have a wine tasting for them, and we'll talk to them about imported wines and why it would be so horrible for American businesses who bring these wines to the market. Why it would be terrible for them to suffer through these tariffs, which could cause them to go out of business, have layoffs. And these are restaurants in your neck of the woods,
Yeah.
senator or congressperson from Oklahoma. That you have Italian restaurants that you love to go to. They are in danger of going out of business. So these kinds of efforts to educate the legislators so that they will understand that hopefully they will leave wine off of a tariff list. That was the goal. Of course, when you have a universal tariff and it applies to everything, we didn't achieve that, but we did achieve certain things like the goods on the water, and now the tariffs are being reduced. So
That's great. Okay, I know we've run a little bit over. I have one more question, and then
sure.
kind of a how do people learn more thing. But the one question that I have is, like, one of the things that I hear a lot is this kind of misconception that American wines face this kind of punitive tariff barriers abroad, and it's just not true. I mean,
Mm,
there are a few countries that are exceptions. I mean, China and
yeah.
Thailand, but by and large, the export markets where American wine is successful, whether that is Canada or that's the EU or whether that's the UK or Japan or Korea, there are essentially no tariff barriers. So, like,
Mm.
how do we spread that word? Because I think that like that undercuts the whole justification that these need to be like reciprocal or retaliatory to be fair.
I agree. And, I mean, the whole idea of using the term reciprocal was a misnomer entirely.
Conscious misnomer. This was an attempt to reframe something that
That's right.
yeah,
Because I mean, he got up there and said, they're charging us this, we should charge them that. It was going to be reciprocal. It's a convincing kind of argument. But in actuality, the rates that they went forward with were based on trade deficits,
yeah,
which is a really poor predictor of whether or not trade is working with a country or not. Deficits are not, trade deficits are not always a bad thing.
Right.
So, but tariffs are. um, I'm sorry, your question again was, how do we know that, how do
Like
we
how do we
communicate
share? How do we get
that the
people to
tariffs
understand?
against American wines are actually much lower than the public might think? It's true. I mean, I think Europe charges pennies on the dollar.
It's
It's
pennies
real.
per bottle. It's not even pennies on the dollar. It's
Exactly.
like a few pennies per bottle, and it's
It-
essentially like an excise tax.
Exactly. And that, which is the way that we've been for, for many, many years. Just we pay excise taxes, which are kind of, pennies on the case. So, yeah, I don't know. It's really an unfortunate situation. And you saw what happened with Canada, for example, when
Right.
the tariffs were threatened there, or were actually imposed there. They just went in and took all the American wines off the shelf. I
Right,
mean,
and that
it
persisted
was,
even after the tariffs were suspended. So, like
yeah,
that's to me one of the big long term risks is just this kind of lingering impression of the United States as a company that makes products that people in other countries won't want to buy.
exactly, exactly. It's creating a lot of anti-American feelings. It's creating a lot of patriotism within those countries, saying "Buy
Yeah,
Canadian," and it's just a self-inflicted wound here. It's a self-inflicted recession,
yeah,
and I really hope saner minds will prevail ultimately and realize what a mistake this is and was. Although this president, again, we don't like to get political here, but this president has not shown an ability to admit mistakes. And I think it's a huge problem because, um, once he never backs down, although this time today he
yeah.
kind of blinked for the first time, right?
And it did. Yeah,
So,
yes. I mean, eventually, maybe 20% decline in the stock market is
mm,
enough to
enough pressure building.
yeah.
Yeah.
There was a comment that came through earlier that I thought was a really good one that said that uncertainty is in itself a tax on the economy, which
So
um,
true.
which is so true. Well, thank you for what you are doing to help mitigate the impacts of this and help advocate for saner policies. I appreciate being kept informed as to what's going on by you and certainly your work to try to make this wine market a better place.
Thanks, Jason. And again, I want to thank you for your support as an American wine producer. That you have no idea how important that is, that legislators would hear that an American producer would say, no, I won't benefit. This is really bad for me too. I really, really appreciate that. And I also, while I have you, I want to just compliment you on the quality of your wines and also the quality of your viticulture and the regenerative measures that you're going towards is really admirable. And keep up the good work.
Thanks, Harmon. For people who want to learn more about either what you do with Skurnik or what you do with the Wine Trade Alliance, what's the best way for people to learn more?
Sure. We have a website, Skurnik.com will get you there, SkurnikWines.com. We are on social media, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Skurnik Wines, I think, is the address. The U.S. Wine Trade Alliance has a Facebook page, which is
Yeah.
probably the most active way we are communicating on social media. I think it's uswinetradealliance.org or something like that. I think there's a website as well. And anybody, you can contact me as well. My email is hs@skurnik.com, and I can direct you or answer any questions anybody has if they're interested.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me, taking a little time out of your Wednesday afternoon. Keep up the great work. And I hope our paths cross in person sooner than later.
My pleasure, Jason. Great to see you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'll be back in 2 weeks.